Okay, so yesterday when we were reading, we learned a little bit more about Lily and T Ray and her life. Um, so today we are starting on page 33. Wait, no, sorry, that's just my PDF. We're starting on page 19 in your books, but you can follow along on this PDF as well. It was after 6 p.m. when I wandered back to the house from the peach stand, having sold nothing, not one peach, and found Rosalind in the living room. Usually she would have gone home by now, but she was wrestling with the rabbit ears on top of the TV, trying to fix the snow on the screen. President Johnson faded in and out, lost in a blizzard. I'd never seen Rosalind so interested in a TV show that she would exert physical energy over it. What happened? I asked. Did they drop the atom bomb? Ever since we'd started bomb drills at school, I couldn't help thinking my days were numbered. Everybody was putting fallout shelters in their backyards, canning tap water, getting ready for the end of time. 13 students in my class made fallout shelter models for their science project, which shows it was not just me worried about it. We were obsessed with Mr. Khrushchev and his missiles. So think about Mr. Khrushchev. Who was he in charge of? What country? Think about that. If you don't know, come ask me. No, the bomb hasn't gone off, she said. Just come here and see if you can fix the TV. Her fists were burrowed so deep into her hips they seemed to disappear. I twisted tinfoil around the antenna. Things cleared up enough to make out President Johnson taking his seat at a desk, people all around. I didn't care much for the president because of the way he held his beagles by the ears. I did admire his wife Ladybird, though, who always looked like she wanted nothing more than to sprout wings and fly away. Rosalind dragged the footstool in front of the set and sat down so the whole thing vanished underneath her. She leaned toward the set, holding a piece of her skirt and winding it around her hands. What is going on? I said. But she was so caught up in whatever was happening, she didn't even answer me. On the screen, the president signed his name on a piece of paper, using about 10 ink pens to get it done. Rosalind! Shh, she said, waving her hand. I had to get the news from the TV man. Today, July 2nd, 1964, he said, the President of the United States signed the Civil Rights Act into law in the East Room of the White House. I looked over at Rosalind, who just sat there, shaking her head, mumbling, Lord have mercy, just looking so disbelieving and happy, like people on television when they answered the $64,000 question. I didn't know whether to be excited for her or worried. All people ever talked about after church were the Negroes and whether they'd get their civil rights. Who was winning, the white people's team or the colored people's team? Like it was a do-or-die contest. When that minister from Alabama, Reverend Martin Luther King, got arrested last month in Florida for wanting to eat in a restaurant, the men at church acted like the white people's team had won the pennant race. I knew they would not take this news lying down, not in 1,000,000 years. Hallelujah, Jesus, Rosalind was saying over there on her stool. Oblivious. What does oblivious mean? Think about that. If you don't know it, write it down on your exit slip for your vocab word. Rosalind had left dinner on the stovetop, her famous smothered chicken. As I fixed T-Ray's plate, I considered how to bring up the delicate manner of my birthday, something T-Ray had never paid attention to in all the years of my life. But every year, like a dope, I got my hopes up, thinking this year would be the one. I had the same birthday as the country, which made it even harder to get noticed. When I was little, I thought people were sending up rockets and cherry bombs because of me. Hooray, Lily was born! Then reality set in, like it always did. I wanted to tell T-Ray that any girl would love a silver charm bracelet, that in fact last year I'd been the only girl at Sullivan Junior High without one, that the whole point of lunchtime was to stand in the cafeteria line jangling your wrist, giving people a guided tour of your charm collection. Excuse me. So, I said, sliding his plate in front of him, my birthday is this Saturday. I watched him pull the chicken meat from the bone with his fork. I was just thinking I would love to have one of those silver charm bracelets I have down at the Mercantile. The house creaked like it did once in a while. Outside the door, Snout gave a low bark, and then the air grew so quiet that I could hear the food being ground up in T-Ray's mouth. He ate his chicken breast and started on the thigh, looking at me now and then in his hard way. I started to say, so then what about the bracelet? but I could see he'd already given his answer. And it caused a kind of sorrow to rise in me that felt fresh and tender and had nothing really to do with the bracelet. I think now it was sorrow for the sound of his fork scraping the plate, the way it swelled in the distance between us, how I was not even in the room. That night I lay in bed listening to the flicks and twitters of thrums inside the bee jar, waiting till it was late enough so I could slip out to the orchard and dig up the tin box that held my mother's things. I wanted to lie down in the orchard and let it hold me. When the darkness had pulled the moon to the top of the sky, I got out of bed, pulled on my shorts and sleeveless blouse, and glided past T-Ray's room in silence, sliding my arms and legs like a skater on ice. What is that? Sliding my arms and legs like a skater on ice. What type of figurative language uses as or like? Sliding my arms and legs like a skater on ice. It's a simile. I didn't see his boots, how he'd parked them in the middle of the hall. When I fell, the clatter startled the air so badly T-Ray's snore changed rhythm. At first it ceased altogether, but then the snore started back with 3 piglet snorts. I crept down the steps, through the kitchen. When the night hit my face, I felt like laughing. The moon was a perfect circle, so full of light that all up the edges had things like the edges of all things had an amber cast. The cicadas rose up, and I ran with bare feet across the grass. To reach my spot, I had to go to the 8th row left of the tractor shed, then walk along it, counting trees till I got to 32. The tin box was buried in the soft dirt beneath the tree, shallow enough that I could dig it up with my hands. When I brushed the dirt from the lid and opened it, I saw first the whiteness of her gloves, then the photograph wrapped in waxed paper just as I'd left it, and finally the funny wooden picture of Mary with the dark face. I took everything out, and stretching out among the fallen peaches, I rested them across my abdomen. When I looked up through the web of trees, the night fell over me, and for a moment I lost my boundaries, feeling like the sky was my own skin and the moon was my heart, beating up there in the dark. Lightning came, not jagged, but in soft golden licks across the sky. I undid the buttons of my shirt and opened it wide, just wanting the night to settle on my skin, and that's how I fell asleep, lying there with my mother's things, with the air making moisture on my chest and the sky puckering with light. I woke to the sound of someone thrashing through the trees. T-Ray! I sat up, panicked, buttoning my shirt. I heard his footsteps, the fast, heavy pant of his breathing. Looking down, I saw my mother's gloves and the 2 pitchers. I stopped buttoning and grabbed them up, fumbling with them, unable to think about what to do, how to hide them. I had dropped the tin box back into its hole, too far away to reach. "Lily!" he shouted, and I saw his shadow plunge toward me across the ground. I jammed the gloves and pitchers under the waistband of my shorts, then reached for the rest of the buttons with shaking fingers. Before I could fasten them, light poured down on me, and there he was without a shirt, holding a flashlight. The beam swept and zagged, blinding me when it swung across my eyes. "Who are you out here with?" he shouted, aiming the light at my half-buttoned top. No one," I said, gathering my knees in my arms, startled by what he was thinking. I couldn't look long at his face, how large and blazing it was, like the face of God. He flung the beam of light into the darkness. "Who's out there?" he yelled. "Please, T-Ray, no one was here but me." "Get up from there," he yelled. I followed him back to the house. His feet struck the ground so hard I felt sorry for the black earth. He didn't speak till we reached the kitchen, and he pulled the Martha White grits from the pantry. "I expect this out of boys, Lily. You can't blame them. But I expect more out of you. You act no better than a slut." He poured a mound of grits the size of an anthill onto the pine floor. "Get over here and kneel down." So grits, they're kind of like a sand-like texture. So basically imagine a thin layer of sand on wooden floor and then having to kneel straight on them. I'd been kneeling on grits since I was 6, but still I never got used to that powdered glass feeling beneath my skin. I walked toward them with those tiny feather steps you expect of a girl in Japan, and lowered myself to the floor, determined not to cry, but the sting was already gathering in my eyes. T-Ray sat in a chair and cleaned his nails with a pocket knife. I swayed from knee to knee, hoping for a second or two of relief, but the pain cut deep into my skin. I bit down on my lip, and it was then I felt the wooden pitcher of Black Mary underneath my waistband. I felt the waxed paper with my mother's picture inside and her gloves stuck to my belly, and it seemed all of a sudden like my mother was there, up against my body, like she was bits and pieces of insulation molded against my skin, helping me absorb all his meanness.